Hi, I'm Jane Puszkar, and I'm here with Tony Colombo. And speaking of getting things ready for the election, I know we've spent a lot of time doing that here recently. We have with us this week candidate for county executive. That would be Bill Eigel. And then later on in the segment, we have Kate Sickles, who is a volunteer for Freedom Principle, to talk to us about Amendment 4. So we've got a really great show lined up for you. Before we get into the questions for Bill, I'd like to remind everyone that here at NewsTalk, we have given each candidate time for the voters to get to know a candidate a little bit better. There was a candidate forum held at Scheidegger Center and broadcast live in St. Charles. The top 3 candidates stated their opinions and views of what's next for St. Charles County. I'd like to introduce and welcome Bill Eigel to St. Charles Patriot Radio and thank him for generously accepting our offer to speak with us and tell us a little bit more about what he envisions for moving St. Charles County forward. I'm going to turn it over to Tony, who's here with me.
Thanks for having me back, Jane, to
My pleasure.
show. As a fairly new St. Charles County transplant from St. Louis County, from North County, as so many people are, to land, in the middle of this massively important election with these local races, that are going to have so much impact on our lives moving forward, as well as some of the statewide ballot issues like Amendment 4 and Amendment 5. Just a perfect time to be talking about all these things, especially with the midterm elections somehow just like a week and a half away at this point, Bill. Great to see you. How are you feeling about voter energy? What are you hearing from the folks that you're talking to out there? How do you feel about the upcoming primaries?
Well, I feel great, and thanks, guys, so much for having me. I'll start with Jane's question, which is kind of about my background, and then kind of head into the election. So a little bit about me. Most of my life has not been spent in politics. A majority of my life has been made up of military service. I'm an Air Force veteran. My dad was in the Air Force. I was born on an Air Force base, and I've raised a family here in St. Charles County. I was an aircraft maintenance officer back in the Air Force days, and I was a little bit slimmer back in those days, too, but we're not going to talk about that. When I got out of the Air Force, I know, we won't talk about that. It happens. It's body positivity. When I got out of the Air Force, I was in 2007. I moved back here to St. Charles County, and we bought a small business, my wife and I, St. Louis Skylights. We were very fortunate because at the time that was the Great Recession. So I could have turned out bad, but we were very fortunate. The business was very successful. And I did that all the way up through 2016. And at that point, I ran for the state Senate, the 23rd Senatorial District. And that was the first of 3 times that the people of St. Charles County have come out to support me in an election. Not just my 2 runs for state senator, but even in the race for governor. We were successful overwhelmingly against Mike Kehoe in 2024. So I've always been kind of known as the guy that's willing to push back on bad government. I'm pretty bold about my opinions on government. I think government is extremely inefficient, and there is a direct relationship between our lives getting better and less government in our society. So if you look at St. Charles County, a lot of the themes that have been taking place in this race have to do with those themes. Probably the number one issue that we're hearing about on the ground and everywhere in the county is property taxes, right? Mm-hmm. Property taxes have absolutely exploded across the county since our current county executive got into office back in 2009. The county budget has increased 400%, way ahead of inflation, way ahead of population growth. And so instead of spending that time figuring out ways to bring down the property tax burden or personal property tax burden, it's just been getting worse and worse. And now it's a crisis in St. Charles County. So the big thing that we're talking about is my plan to eliminate personal property tax so you can actually own your car instead of paying rent to government. And if we're successful, we're going to be the first county in the state of Missouri to get that done. That's number 1. The number 2 issue that we talked about, okay, well, we'll come back to that.
But I want to, because I have a question about, personal property taxes.
That's right.
There's been an advertisement by your competitor that was put on Facebook that was AI generated and frankly, not very kind to you.
Yeah.
It showed you laughing with the current county executive and claiming that you can't fulfill your promise to the people about the elimination of personal property tax. Imagine that. What's your response to that ad?
Well, first of all, I have seen that ad. And yes, the things that my avatar was saying in that ad were, of course, untruthful. But I will say...
That wasn't you?
No, it wasn't me. But I will say that my avatar did not have any gray hair. So I don't know if you guys noticed that.
No, I didn't know.
But my gray hair completely disappeared according to my avatar. So it wasn't all bad. When it comes to personal property tax, listen, I feel like Republicans have always had a message of cutting taxes and reducing the size of government. Right now, our residents are paying about $120 million collectively in personal property taxes. That's going to schools, that's going to fire departments, that's going to ambulance districts. I'm talking about going into the $600 million county budget, finding some savings, finding some ways. I think we can easily cut that budget by 10 to 15% and transfer those savings over to the collector to pay off personal property tax bills dues on behalf of its residents. This is actually pretty normal in political terms. Every time the federal government or the state government talks about sending a rebate check or paying off a tax burden of some sort, this is kind of in line with that. Longer term, I'd like to make the cuts in the changes that we'll use to get rid of personal property tax in the short term. I'd like to make those permanent, so we're probably going to have to go to the county charter to make some changes. But the reality is we're going to prove that it works in the first year or two that we get this done. And I think that overwhelmingly, we talk about affordability in this election. My goodness. How much more affordable would our residents' lives be and their budgets be if we got rid of that bill that comes out on December 1st for the crime of owning a car? That's the vision I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of, it's funny you bring up AI because that's such a hot button for me. It's an issue that I am borderline obsessed with because AI is just starting to be a part of literally every part of our lives. And this is the first election where you're seeing like an abundance of AI created political ads.
That's an understatement, but
yes. Yeah, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
It's only going to get worse moving forward. And you can, if you know what you're looking for, also, it's very frustrating because a lot of it is just cheaply done AI slop. But I don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole, but it does bring up another issue that has been hot in the in this campaign and even, across the country with the expansion of AI. Building data centers. Is that something, are you hearing from voters on the campaign trail about data centers or just the, evolution of AI and regulations and things like that in general?
Yes. As a matter of fact, when I saw that AI generated ad, my first thought was, man, that fancy AI generated ad for one of my opponents might require a lot of data centers in the future. So,
maybe.
But interestingly enough, that ad was made and we don't have any data centers in St. Charles County. So a lot of our technology requires data storage. And I'm not anti-technology. I'm not telling people that I don't think they should use AI. I'm not telling people that they shouldn't use their phone and their smartphones. What I am saying is that right now the conversation about data centers involves taxpayers bailing out corporations to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, which is basically a fleecing of the taxpayer in order to allow Google, who has more money than they know what to do with, to come in and build these data centers. And we're talking about putting a huge burden on our ratepayers for water and electricity because these data centers consume enormous amounts of electricity. They didn't consume enormous amounts of water. The one that they were going to put into St. Charles City was going to double the water consumption of St. Charles City. Just one data center was going to double the entire city's water consumption. It was going to double their electrical consumption. So when they really took a look at that, St. Charles City decided, hey, this is a bad idea. We're not going to do this. We're going to actually put a ban on data centers moving forward. And by the way, there was only one candidate in this county executive race that showed up with those residents of St. Charles City to oppose publicly and vociferously that data center in St. Charles City. It was me. It was me. It was me. I didn't hear a peep out of Steve Ellman at that point because Steve Ellman is doing everything to avoid the conversation. And I think this is very pressing because, the master plan that the county comes out with every 5 years that talks about how we're going to grow and where we're going to grow as a county actually specifically called for six specific areas of St. Charles County to be developed and prioritize data center construction. Out by Forestdale, the Wentzville Business Park, the 370 Business Park, east of Hoff Road in O'Fallon, potentially the Missouri Research Park. All of these areas are being identified all over the county for data center development. So I'm the only candidate that's a no on these data centers.
We're here talking with Bill Eigel, county executive candidate for St. Charles County. So, Bill, you bring up some great points, but where are we going to put these things? Nobody wants them in their backyard, if you know what I mean. Where do they belong?
Well, didn't Elon Musk say he's going to put them in space? I mean,
I don't know. I don't follow Elon Musk.
He literally said that.
Did he really?
Said that.
Okay.
And
that's better than my
what a great cooling mechanism. You don't have to use up any water if you're going to park them in orbit. So, listen, if there's a conversation somewhere down the road where we're not fleecing the taxpayers, where we're not fleecing the ratepayers, and we found a way to make sure that these aren't going to have a huge impact environmentally on our communities, listen, I'm happy to have any discussion. But the reality is that's not where the conversation is right now. So I think giving the voters a clear message that I'm a no on data centers. We're not going to allow, we're going to protect the taxpayers. We're going to protect the ratepayers. We're certainly not going to go the Steve Ellman route of actually identifying areas in St. Charles that will get them.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something really important there because, as I mentioned a minute ago, AI is evolving. It's going to be a big part of our lives moving forward. Powering those AI systems is going to happen. But this rush to put data centers up willy-nilly, wherever, without looking into how much they're going to cost, how much space they're going to take, all the things that you just mentioned, Bill, are so important. So I'm the same way. I'm not anti-data center, but we have to be very smart about
anti-technology.
Yeah. Well, anti-technology. Yeah, I'm not anti-technology. And personally, I'm not even necessarily anti-data center. I'm anti-data center the way it's been presented to this point.
Behind closed doors.
We got to be smarter and have a deeper, longer conversation about where do these things go and how do we make them not the burden on the community and not put them in people's backyards. Exactly.
It was literally going to be in people's
backyards
in St. Charles City. Yeah. And actually, the same reason that I don't want to subsidize a bunch of data centers, it's the same reason I don't want to subsidize a bunch of sports stadiums, right? I don't want to buy the Royals. I love the Cardinals, but I don't want to buy the Cardinals a new stadium. So we're not going to buy anybody any data centers. We're not going to buy all these subsidies that are making our tax code even worse. We've got to step back from that.
What I don't like is all the deals being made behind closed doors and all the non-disclosure agreements. What can you comment on that? I mean, that
absolutely. In fact, look at the deal that was signed on the data center in Montgomery County just a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Mike Kehoe goes out for a ribbon cutting ceremony in Montgomery County for a brand new data center that's going to give away $900 million of Montgomery County taxpayer money over the next 30 years. $900 million. Now, Montgomery County, the population of Montgomery County is about a fifth of St. Charles City, and they're going to put a massive data center out there, meaning the electrical increase for that entire county, it could increase by a factor of 5 or 6. Also, these giant data centers can get a good deal at the expense of the taxpayer. That's crazy.
Who's going to build that?
I think it's Google. Google's building it.
Oh, wow.
And if I had to make a list of entities that don't deserve your tax money or more than you do, Google would probably be near the top of the list.
Right. I think they're a pretty profitable organization, according to their stock price anyway.
St. Charles Patriot Radio with Missouri State Representative Richard West and former Francis Howell School Board member Jane Puszkar.
Tony, Bill, and I are back, and we're so glad that Bill accepted the offer to come in and speak with us. So let's continue with some questions. Are you ready, Bill?
I'm ready.
Are you sure?
I'm always ready.
I know that.
Always be ready.
You definitely are. You're kind of like a Boy Scout. But anyway, changing gears. Yeah. Changing gears. What's your stand on flock cameras? Are they good for the county or not? I understand that there's 29 in the county and 22 of those are operational. I've also been told that flock cameras can sell the information that they record. So tell me your stand on flock cameras.
I'm opposed to these flock cameras. We can enforce the law. We can support our police without infringing upon the personal liberties of our citizens. So moving our community towards a police state, a surveillance state, which is what these flock cameras represent, is just something I've never been a fan of. It's not something I'm going to support. And if you look at my history in the Missouri Senate, it's the same reason I was opposed to PDMP. PDMP, the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, was a massive database.
I was against that too.
For all of your prescription drugs. Why does the government need to have access to that information? So we have the government far too much in our lives. And actually, this is another issue where I actually contrast greatly with both of my opponents. Both of my opponents support the flock cameras. They support the police constantly surveilling your private data and your movements. I actually have a license plate camera less than 100 feet from my house. I mean, and I don't live on a busy street, so I'm wondering if Steve Ellman's up there keeping an eye on me.
They're watching. They're
watching, making sure I'm not speeding around the corners or something. So no, I'm opposed to flock cameras. I believe in personal liberty. That would be a big change in policy from the current county executive.
What really kind of kills me about that is back in the Tea Party days, we the people got together and decided to do away with those red light cameras.
Same
yes,
idea, right?
Right. They're still hanging up there. They're not operational right now. But we fought hard to get rid of that. And then suddenly flock cameras are back. And I will qualify it with, I'm all for catching the perpetrators. I mean, aren't you too?
Of course.
But don't we have other means rather than catching me in your wide swath that you put out there for these flock cameras? And I understand there's a different kind of camera, Conatec or something. You heard of that?
Well, we've had a pretty good history of law enforcement in St. Charles County without all these cameras.
Well, that's true.
And doesn't the fact that they have the ability and want to make sure ahead of time that they can sell your data, doesn't that kind of give away that maybe the priority is not law enforcement or safety if they are worried about selling your data from those cameras?
It's crazy. We need more restrictions on these flock cameras. I've always been a big supporter of our law enforcement. I passed the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights a few years ago. I've been in previous runs for office. I've gotten the endorsement of police organizations. But the reality is, we can support our police. We can have safe communities without completely sacrificing our personal liberty.
One of the other issues, and as I mentioned, the thing about these August primaries, which are a week from Tuesday, it's right around the corner, and local politics are the most important politics because these are the issues that impact our day-to-day lives. So when you're talking to voters out there, ahead of these August primaries, what are some of the other hyper local issues? For example, apartments, I know, is a hot button issue in St. Charles County. You can talk about that or any other of the super local issues that voters are concerned about.
So the top three issues, we've already talked about data centers. We've already talked about property taxes. Number two on that list are the apartment complexes and kind of the urbanization of St. Charles County. Since 2010, we've had more than 11,000 new apartment units, multifamily units be built in St. Charles County. And our current county executive, Steve Elman, just takes the attitude of, that's the city's problem. There's nothing the county can do, which is kind of the attitude he has about a lot of the problems facing our county. But the reality is the highest position of leadership in St. Charles County can have a huge influence in influencing, pushing back on the cities. Here's what I'd like to see when it comes to these apartments, because we've got too many. I'd like to see a density plan and requirement that's countywide, that accounts for all the apartments we have already and encourages and holds the city's feet to the fire by restricting their ability to build more apartments. How would we do that? I would actually leverage the cities and get their compliance by making sure that if we're going to continue to give them road funds from the county, some of the other support they get from the county, they're going to have to play ball with us when it comes to all this urbanization, which they haven't done for the past 20 years. And Steve Elman has stood by and done nothing to put a stop to this. And by the way, I think it's incredibly cynical that a week ago, after 20 years of being in office and doing nothing on this issue, a week ago, the county council passes a 6-month moratorium on new apartment complex.
That's
6 months.
Why didn't they do a year?
Why didn't
the city
did? Permanent.
And
Make it permanent. If you want to undo it, you can undo it. So it's long enough to get them through election day. They've also put a 6-month moratorium on data centers so that they can create a bunch of commercials, making it look like Steve Elman is actually doing something on all these issues, even though he hasn't done a darn thing for the past 20 years. It's that kind of political cynicism that is just crushing the Elman campaign right now. And that's why, in spite of the fact that he has been in office since the Clinton administration, I think on August 4th, we're going to hold him to his commitment that he was going to retire.
Why do you think he changed his mind about running?
Oh, he's actually said that. He actually has been very upfront. This is a very personal campaign for Steve, and it has nothing to do with policy. It has nothing to do with the bigger vision for St. Charles County. He's been very upset. He doesn't like me personally. Now listen, I understand I'm not the most likable guy, but I'm unashamed when it comes to policy, and I'm willing to tell the status quo and all these swamp creatures out there no when they need to hear it. And Steve Elman has been coddled in office, hidden away from the real problems that St. Charles County citizens have been dealing with in the real world for the past 20 years. And to have somebody like me come along and challenge him directly in the public hurts him personally because he's not used to that kind of pressure. We're going to keep the pressure up, and he's going to feel the pressure reach a maximum when we get to August 4th.
Boy, I can't wait to see that. What other issues that you know of that are facing St. Charles County?
Those are the big ones. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to ask, I know we're going to talk more about Amendment 4 and some of the amendments later on with our next guest, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that too, because I hope that the amendments are one of the things that are going to drive people to show up. Voter turnout is and engagement is always a concern for every election, especially a primary election and a midterm.
Mm-hmm.
But, as we've mentioned, these are really important, impactful issues. So I'm hoping to see that engagement at a higher level. Where do you stand on some of the big amendments, 4 and 5 especially?
Yeah, I'm a big yes on Amendment 4. I think that one's a very, in my mind, a very straightforward decision. We've had a lot of out-of-state special interests come into Missouri in the past few years and try to hijack our Constitution by misleading, putting things on the ballot that are multi-subject, putting things on the ballot that are moving our state more into a blue state mentality. Look no further than Amendment 3 that made us one of the most pro-choice states in the union just in the last election cycle. So I'm a big yes to protect our Constitution on Amendment 4. Amendment 5, I haven't made up my mind. I haven't taken a position publicly. I recognize the benefits of eliminating the income tax in the state of Missouri. They're growing much better than Missouri is. So I've always been an advocate for eliminating the income tax. So if I were the governor, which I'm not, if I were the governor, I wouldn't be asking for the people to consider just a tax switch. I'd be going into the $52 billion state budget, cutting a bunch of waste out of that budget, and then rolling those savings directly into income tax cuts without having to go through this kind of very difficult, complicated constitutional process. I'm proposing on personal property tax at the county level.
You were in Jeff City for a long time. Sticking with Amendment 5 for just a second.
I think you're exactly right. A couple of years ago, we passed a constitutional amendment that created a new Department of the National Guard at the state level. We had to modify our Constitution to do that. Well, at the same time, not only was there a constitutional change required, there was a state law change required. So we actually passed both at the same time, even before the constitutional amendment made it to the ballot. The state law changes can happen at the same time as the constitutional amendment. So ideally, what we would have seen would have been the constitutional amendment going in front of the people and an actual law that would have been passed by the legislature showing, hey, this is what's actually going to happen. Then the people can actually make a choice if your intention is to ask them to make that choice. Well, who's going to get a benefit? Real estate is going to get special exemptions under the new law. Healthcare industry is going to get exemptions. Agriculture industry is going to get... Who's going to get all these exemptions we're potentially talking about in the future? Why is anybody getting any exemptions on whatever sales tax they're talking about? And I think that makes people very uncomfortable. Amendment 5 is the reflection, though, really of one guy and his tax policy, and that's Mike Kehoe. Mike Kehoe doesn't really believe in shrinking government. He believes in tax shifting, kind of moving, dollars around. We saw with the budget this year that there was no major effort by the governor to reduce spending. And until he gets serious about that, the idea that he's going to pass any kind of major tax legislation, I think is very questionable.
We only have a couple minutes left here with Bill Eigel, and I want to touch one more time on Amendment 4 because I think that's, for me, that really is the most important thing on the ballot when it comes to statewide issues.
Yes.
Because, a lot of these other issues we can talk till we're blue in the face, but if we don't fix IP reform, a lot of this, won't even matter in the long run. Again, leaning on your experience in Jeff City, the influence that special interests have, and how much they've taken advantage of the current system, and why it needs to be fixed. You're a strong proponent of Amendment 4. I am as well. What has been the problem with getting that message and information out to the voters? Because I feel like
we've lost the narrative.
Yeah, people are confused, and we've lost the narrative, and we've only got a few days left to get it back.
Yeah, it's I'll give credit to Tim Jones. Actually made this comment at a pachyderms a couple of weeks ago that I was at listening to him talk. He supports Amendment 4 and Amendment 5, but he said he was talking about Amendment 4. If Amendment 4 fails, the liberal special interest groups are trying to get a measure put on the November ballot that will strip the legislature from interfering or having any further conversation about the initiative petition process even more. And if the initiative petition process persists in its current form, beware a Missouri where the legislative branch of state government is no longer able to actually implement the very policies the people are electing it to implement. So you're not going to be able, the legislature will have no ability to have an impact on making this a pro-life state. The legislature will eventually lose its ability to cut tax rates and change tax rates because it will be decided by direct democracy at the ballot. That is not the vision that our founders had in mind for our republic of states. So I think that, the narrative for Amendment 4 and Amendment 5 are set by the same person. It's the highest elected office in the state of Missouri. Governor Mike Kehoe's record is on the ballot. His credibility as a leader for the state of Missouri is on the ballot on August 4th with Amendment 4 and Amendment 5. And if both of those initiatives get blown out at the ballot, which I'm very nervous based on the feedback I'm getting.
Me too.
The one person that's going to have to answer that is Governor Mike Kehoe.
Yeah, I think admittedly, the whole thing, when you put out there, just people in government, you do these backroom deals about these data centers, then you pass this moratorium that's only good for 6 months. And I could go on and cite many, many other cases, does not build trust in the voters. Absolutely. I know some people that are highly informed and they're against 4 because they don't want their right taken away for the initiative petition. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, while you don't want to be encumbered in your activities to get things in the Constitution, you're not doing anything to stop opposing viewpoints that only talk with money, and that's all that they do. So it's just really it's not a good situation. I'm nervous too. I really am.
It's very difficult to adjudicate complicated policy issues in the context of public campaigns that are being hijacked by tens of millions of dollars to put out oftentimes false messages about the consequences of the ballot measures they're talking about. That is why the founders envisioned a representative republic. So you could elect someone that you
not
believe,
a majority,
not that agrees with you 100% of the time, but that has enough in common with you that you're entrusting them to go down to Jefferson City and make informed decisions on your behalf.
Precisely.
That's not where we're at right now. And it's I'm obviously we're focusing a ton on my race as we go into August 4th because the consequences for St. Charles are immense. But from a state level perspective, really between Amendment 4 and 5 and then Amendment 3 in November, the entire gubernatorial legacy is on the line. So I know that I'm doing everything I've even donated to Amendment 3. When the governor came to St. Charles County a couple months ago, I went to the fundraiser and wrote a check to his PAC. I mean, think about that for a second. So this isn't about personality conflicts. We're trying to pass good policy. I want Amendment 3 to pass. I want Amendment 4 to pass. Still chewing on Amendment 5. But the entire 2 years of kind of the good guy politics that we've had in Jefferson City is going to be on the ballot over the next couple months.
Something that I haven't heard this time that we usually hear about every election cycle is this is the most important election of your life. I haven't heard that, but you know what? It's true. There's a whole lot that's on the ballot and that we all need to get out and vote. So I'm sorry, Bill, we're out of time. I really am, but I want to thank you for coming in and talking to us.
It's a pleasure.
I know it is a pleasure. Next, we have Kate Sickles with us to discuss some very important information on A4, which you just covered. Well, I'm looking forward to see what she has to say. So, Bill, thank you again for coming and talking to us. And don't forget to vote.
I will definitely not forget to vote. You guys are great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
St. Charles Patriot Radio with Missouri State Representative Richard West and former Francis Howell School Board member Jane Puszkar.
Well, we're actually here. Welcome back. We're actually here with Tony Colombo since Richard is out this week. So thanks for hanging with us and coming back. There's a lot of noise out there this election season. So much noise that many people I speak with aren't even sure that they're going to vote, how they're going to vote on the amendments on the ballot, which is, I guess we're getting late in the game here. To clear up some of that confusion, we've invited Kate Sickles to try and clear some of the fog around Amendment 4. Kate is a volunteer for Freedom Principle and has been working for months educating people about the amendment. Welcome back, and thank you for agreeing to help, Kate. So, Kate, I'd like to start with a question. Why is Amendment 4 even on the ballot?
A4 is on the ballot because we need it, because we have a flawed citizen initiative petition process. Right now, well-funded special interest groups are literally going around our legislature and buying our Constitution through the citizen initiative petition process. And so our Constitution is being filled with laws instead of actual constitutional amendments that should be in them.
Kate, this is Tony Colombo, and I have a weekday show here every weekday at 2:00, and the listeners that listen to me in the afternoon know that Amendment 4 is a tremendous hot button issue for me. It is something that I've been I've been screaming about IP reform for years, and now that we finally have it on the ballot, the fear and the idea that we may not get it across the finish line is terrifying to me. So this has been something that I have been focused on for a long time. Now we're just right around the corner from these August primaries, literally just a few days away. I feel like voter information, education, knowledge about this issue and what they're voting on the ballot is still confusing, and people are still trying to grasp what Amendment 4 means. Can you kind of just explain a little bit of the details of if somebody was against Amendment 4, what would you say to them to try to change their mind and explain the importance of this issue?
So first I'll tell you what it does, and then I'll tell you it depends on what their objections are, to be honest. And I know a couple of them, so I'll go through those. But what Amendment 4 does is it bans foreign funding, and you will have some people who say, well, we already have that in law, so why do we need that? Well, it elevates it to the constitutional level, which means if we ever have a change in leadership or whatever down in Jeff City, they can't rip that back out and then proceed to use foreign funding again. So then it also requires public hearings. Right now, there is zero vetting for citizen initiative petitions. It's just well-funded money coming in and just buying up amendments into our Constitution. And then it also criminalizes signature fraud, and it requires the full text of any amendment to come in that you're going to vote on to be available at the ballot. Now, remember the marijuana one. There are 40 pages in our Constitution right now out of 200 pages. So 20% of our Constitution right now is just marijuana. That's insane.
Yeah.
So can you imagine if you had gone to the ballot and they handed you 40 pages of what says you should be able to smoke marijuana? I mean, that's crazy. What it is it's full of loopholes. They always tell you this is for the children, this is for education, when in reality, it's so full of all of their kickbacks and their monopoly and their tax credits that no money is going to the children. So, and the last thing it does is it requires broad statewide approval. Now, the arguments are that this is putting more emphasis or more makes it harder to approve for the citizen initiative petition. This is what I say to those people. The legislature already has to have broad statewide approval to even get it to the ballot. And we get to go through multiple hearings with multiple opportunities to give our input, to tell our legislatures whether we like it or not. And we can read it on the website all the way through the process if they change it. But so we have broad state approval once they pass it. Now we're just nodding to them that we agree with them. The opposite is true of citizen initiative petition. We're getting very few signatures that even require it to get onto the ballot. Nobody knows what it says. They lie to us when they spend $32 million like they did 2 years ago on initiative petitions. And then we pass it and we find out it's nothing like what they said it was. So, and with no statewide approval, it literally is Kansas City and St. Louis ruling our state. What I tell people is, imagine if California and New York picked our president every 4 years.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it.
That's insane. We would never let that. That's what the founding fathers said. We need a representative republic. So what this is doing is forcing the citizen initiative petition to fall under a broad statewide approval to be able to get passed. We already have that in the legislature, so we don't need to apply the same standard to that. It's just when we put in the broad statewide approval, whether it's the beginning of the process or the end.
Kate, there's a lot of people out there, you touched on republic. There's a lot of people out there that think that we are and call us a democracy, which we are not. We're a representative republic. And I was just talking to somebody last night who is not exactly or wasn't for Amendment 4. And one of the reasons is that, well, they don't want, they want to have a 50+1. And I pointed out the fact that, well, that means that Springfield, Kansas City, and St. Louis City are going to be driving almost all the initiative petitions. And is that what you want? I know you live in, around the area probably of St. Charles, but at the same point, that's just given these other places just too much voice. And I think that's one of the biggest points that people don't realize, because they're sold on the ad that, oh, well, don't take away our right. Well, when you take away the right of the bad guys, I think our Constitution deserves enough respect that it should not be changed. How many times do you remember it's been changed since it started?
Yes. So our United States Constitution has been changed 27 times in 248 years, and 10 of those were the Bill of Rights, and 2 of them was putting in a prohibition and taking it back out. Now, in 86 years, we have changed the Missouri Constitution 129 times. It is is literally a law book now. It is not a constitution. And that's great.
You said 40 pages on marijuana, 129 amendments. If we don't put a stop to this madness now, it'll be, down in a few years from now, kids, that are studying Missouri law will be talking about, Amendment 297. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Are they going to be saying, remember when Missouri was a great state?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. This is how Colorado became blue. They took over their constitution. This is all special interest, well-funded, radical leftists that are trying to usurp the legislative process because they can't get enough people elected in the state of Missouri to have broad statewide approval. So they're literally just buying our constitutions. So it's crazy. It's just absolutely crazy.
Yes, it is. And we're here talking with Kate Sickles. Kate, what other information can you share? You covered a lot of ground, but what other information can you share to help people make up their minds that this is not a bad bill?
Right. So another thing that people seem to be very worried about is, well, what if 7 districts say something's good and 1 district can veto it? And I say to those people, good. Because you have to wonder why 7 districts of our state would vote yes for something and 1 district would not. You have to look and see there must be something detrimental to that 1 district in whatever they're trying to pass. And here's the example I use. It is very likely, if we don't get Amendment 4 passed, that there will be an attempt to have a city-county merger in St. Louis County and St. Louis City. And the St. Louis County people do not want that. But they could spend a lot of money going across the rest of the state and drumming up people to go to the voter booths to say, hey, St. Louis City is going to become this great city once the county takes it over, right? And we're here saying, absolutely not. So we want... If there's something detrimental to a specific congressional district, they should have the veto in it.
Kate, you did a great job of explaining the issue, and this is where a lot of my frustration comes in, because it's so easy to point back at just the recent history when it comes to this type of legislation in the state of Missouri and see how easy and powerful the special interest money has been, how they've been able to put these amendments in, oftentimes, on an off-season election with low voter turnout, where they just kind of, they mobilize their small group. They've got a ton of money, as all special interests do, and they sneak this through. And that's a pretty easy message to let's stop the control of the special interests and put that control back into the people of Missouri. But that message gets lost. Why has there been so much confusion? And are we not doing a good enough job of conveying this issue? And if not, where can people go to get this information and learn the truth about Amendment 4?
So a couple things there. One, I think the confusion comes that people honestly believe that they can actually get a citizen initiative petition done. Do you know in the past 23 years, the progressive liberals have gotten 23 ballot measures through citizen initiative petition to the ballot, and 14 of them have passed. Do you know how many we've gotten in the past 23 years, the conservatives? Zero. Because it takes so much money to do it. The last time that the conservatives got a citizen initiative petition passed was in 1980, and that was the Hancock Amendment. When I talk to people, I say, citizen initiative petition. There's nothing citizen about this. This is well-funded special interest groups that are coming in and buying our Constitution. That's all it is. And the reason that Kansas City and St. Louis are ruling our state is because those special interests only have to go to 2 major cities in our state and drum up the vote to get out to vote. And then the rest of us have to deal with the consequences. In Amendment 3 in 2024, 12% of voters put abortion and transgenderism into our Constitution. 12%. This is all about voter turnout, and we need to help people understand why this is so important that they get out and vote yes on 4. And the way they can get more information, freedomprinciplemissouri.org. On the website, if you click on the Amendment 4 tab, I have an 11-minute educational video where I go through exactly what it does and why we need it. It's short, it's sweet, and we need that shared everywhere. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
Kate, I just want to touch on something in the short time that we have left. You've mentioned the city-county merger in St. Louis and how bad the county is against it. And let's say it does pass and the 2 merge. I posit to you the possibility of a St. Louis-St. Charles merger. Because
keep going. That's right.
A lot of the people, could that be a reality?
Well, that's just another thing. They'll just keep expanding it. If we don't stop if we don't stop the citizen initiative petition and the ease of getting something through, then they're not going to stop with one thing. And people say to me, okay, well, let's get this stuff out of the Constitution. Unless we pass Amendment 4, why would the legislators want to come and get things back out of the Constitution that they know 2 years from now are going to go right back in it? And that's what I'm telling people about Amendment 3. If you want Amendment 3 to pass, you better pass Amendment 4 then, or we're going to be fighting abortion again in 2 more years.
That's exactly the point that I was going to make. If 4 doesn't pass, 3 is It is important. I do want people to know. No, I know.
It is important because we need to get the right to abortions and the right to transgenderism out of our Constitution. But we will be fighting this fight again then if we don't do 4. Because what 4 is going to do is make them think twice before spending that kind of money in our state when they have to actually get broad statewide approval.
You're right. You're exactly right. Kate, I want to thank you very much for coming and clearing up some of the fog around A4.
Thanks for having me.
It was great. And I can encourage everybody to go to freedomprinciple.org and check out that 11-minute Freedom
Principle Mo, yeah.
We're just a few days away from the final vote now. So one of the blessings in this country is the opportunity to speak out and have our voices heard at the ballot box. So please, everybody, do not throw that chance away. We'll be back next week.